Okay, so when you think of the United States and Russia, you probably picture these two massive superpowers sitting on completely opposite sides of the globe, right? Well, get ready, because today we're going to completely shatter that illusion. We're looking at the hidden proximity of the USA and Russia, and I promise you, by the end of this explainer, you are never going to look at a world map the exact same way again.
Part 1. The Great Map Deception. See, have you ever stared at a standard, flat world map and just accepted it as the absolute truth? If you measure the distance between the mainlands of America and Russia on one of those regular maps, they look like they're separated by this massive gulf of 7,500 kilometers. Looking at that endless expanse of ocean, it totally makes sense why we naturally think of them as distant, geographical opposites. It's an illusion almost everyone falls for. But here is where we completely flip the script. Just 3 kilometers. Yeah, you heard me right. That is the jaw-dropping reality here. Despite what that gigantic 7,500-kilometer gap on the map tells you, these two colossal countries are actually just 3 kilometers apart at their absolute closest point. I mean, really think about that for a second. 3 kilometers? That's literally a distance you could cover in a brisk, everyday walk. So how on earth is this actually possible? This brings us to Part 2, the truth of the Bering Strait. To understand this incredibly short distance, we have to kind of ignore the main continental land masses for a minute and focus on one specific feature, the Bering Strait. This is the body of water located directly between America and Russia. It basically acts as the watery divide separating these two global superpowers. But here's the catch. The strait itself, as a whole, is way wider than 3 kilometers. So where exactly are we getting that tiny number from?
Let's get into it in Part 3, 2 islands, 2 countries.
Okay, so let's conceptually zoom in right into the very middle of this remote, frigid water. Smack in the center of the strait, we find 2 completely distinct, separate islands. And you guys, these aren't just random rocks floating out in the ocean. They actually serve as the physical boundary markers between the east and the west.
See, the official border between the USA and Russia doesn't just, arbitrarily float out there in the empty ocean. It runs precisely between these 2 islands. You've got the small island and the big island. And the gap of water separating them, boom, that is exactly where our magic number comes in, just 3 kilometers.
So you're probably wondering who actually lives in this incredibly tight space. Well, the small island belongs to America, and it's home to a really tiny, tight-knit community of just 82 people. On the flip side, the big island belongs to Russia, but there are absolutely no civilian residents there at all. It's only Russian soldiers stationed at a military outpost. That means the absolute closest American entity to Russia is this small group of 82 citizens just living out their regular daily lives literally 3 kilometers away from a Russian military presence. It's such a surreal juxtaposition.
And that leads us to our final part, the Icy Winter Bridge.
Because the story definitely doesn't end there. A complete crazy environmental transformation happens in this exact spot when the harsh winter arrives. You see, the temperatures in the Bering Strait drop to these incredibly extreme lows. And when they do, the freezing climate causes that entire 3-kilometer stretch of churning ocean water to just freeze over. We're talking totally solid from shore to shore.
As our source material actually points out, an ice bridge forms between the 2 countries. Nature literally steps in and builds a physical, frozen bridge connecting these 2 massive nations. Where there was once this dividing ocean keeping them apart, suddenly there is solid, walkable ground connecting them.
Let's just walk through the logic of this wild natural phenomenon real quick. First, the extreme winter completely freezes the ocean water. Second, a totally natural ice bridge forms, firmly locking the 2 islands together. And third, and honestly this is the most mind-blowing part, because of this ice bridge, it becomes physically possible to just step outside and walk across the frozen surface straight to the other country's island. I mean, for that brief period, the 2 nations literally connect.
Which brings us to a final question. Did you ever in your wildest dreams imagine walking from America to Russia? We spend so much time looking at traditional maps that trick our eyes into seeing this massive 7,500-kilometer divide. But the reality? The actual gap is just a 3-kilometer frozen walk away. Keep that in mind the next time you think about how distant the world really is.